The dust kicked up behind Zelda Whitmore's boots as she ran toward the chapel, her pale blue wedding dress clutched in trembling hands, only to find the building empty except for Reverend Patterson, who looked at her with such pity that she knew before he spoke that her sister Caroline and her intended husband had vanished together into the desert morning. Her knees buckled against the wooden pew, the carefully pressed dress falling to the floor as the Reverend's words washed over her in waves she could barely comprehend. Something about a note left at the boarding house, something about California and a fresh start, something about how sorry they both were, but love could not be denied. The year was 1878, and Red River, New Mexico, had never felt so suffocating, so small, so utterly determined to witness her complete humiliation as the abandoned bride whose own sister had stolen the man she was supposed to marry in just 3 hours. Zelda was 22 years old, and she had never known heartbreak like this, not when her parents had died of fever 5 years ago, leaving her and Caroline alone in the world, not when they had lost the family farm to debt and been forced to move into a cramped room above the general store where Zelda worked 6 days a week. Not even when Caroline had started looking at Thomas Brennan with those calculating eyes, though Zelda had told herself she was imagining things, that her younger sister would never betray her like that. But she had. They both had. And now the entire town would know that Zelda Whitmore was not woman enough to keep her intended husband faithful, not pretty enough or clever enough or whatever enough to compete with her own sister. She did not cry in the chapel. She picked up her dress, folded it carefully despite the way her hands shook, and walked out into the bright June sunlight with her head held high. The town square was already filling with people who had come for the wedding, and she could see the exact moment they realized something was wrong. Whispers followed her like tumbleweeds, rolling and gathering momentum, but she kept walking toward the boarding house where she and Caroline had been living. She needed to see the note. She needed to understand how long they had been planning this, how many times Thomas had kissed her hand and spoken of their future while secretly planning to run away with Caroline. The boarding housekeeper, Mrs. Henderson, was waiting at the bottom of the stairs with the note clutched in her plump hand and tears streaming down her weathered face. "Oh, my dear girl," she said, but Zelda simply took the note and climbed the stairs to the room she had shared with her sister. The handwriting was Caroline's, flowery and dramatic as always. "Dearest Zelda," it began, and Zelda almost laughed at the audacity. "By the time you read this, Thomas and I will be far from Red River. I know you will hate me, and I do not blame you, but I must follow my heart. Thomas and I have been in love for months, since before he proposed to you. We tried to fight it, truly we did, but love is stronger than duty. He only proposed to you because he thought it was the right thing to do, being the elder sister and all, but he loves me. He has always loved me. I am sorry for the pain this will cause you, but surely you would not want to marry a man whose heart belongs to another. We are going to California to start fresh, where no one knows us. Please do not try to find us. I hope someday you will understand and forgive me. Your sister, Caroline." Zelda read the note 3 times, searching for some hint of genuine remorse, some acknowledgement that what they had done was cruel beyond measure. But there was nothing except Caroline's usual self-centered justification for her actions. Thomas had always loved Caroline. He had only proposed to Zelda out of duty, as if that made it better. As if that did not make it infinitely worse, knowing that the man she had trusted, the man she had allowed to kiss her and make promises to, had been lying to her face for months while carrying on with her sister behind her back. She folded the note carefully and placed it in her trunk, then began methodically packing Caroline's remaining belongings into a crate. Every dress, every hair ribbon, every cheap piece of jewelry that Caroline had accumulated. She did not want a single reminder of her sister in this room. Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. "What can I do, dear?" the older woman asked. "Should I fetch the sheriff? They cannot have gotten far." "No," Zelda said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Let them go. I do not want a husband who has to be dragged back to me by force." "But the humiliation, dear. Everyone will talk." "They are already talking," Zelda said flatly. "At least this way I can hold my head up, knowing I did not beg a man to stay." She finished packing Caroline's things and carried the crate downstairs, setting it by the back door. Then she returned to her room, changed out of her good dress into her everyday calico work dress, and pinned up her dark blonde hair with hands that had finally stopped shaking. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror above the washstand. Her face was pale. Her blue eyes were shadowed with exhaustion and grief. But she looked composed. She looked like a woman who would survive this. The knock on her door startled her. "Yes? Miss Whitmore?" A male voice, unfamiliar. "Mrs. Henderson said I might find you here. I am Owen Calhoun. I heard about what happened this morning, and I wanted to speak with you if you have a moment." Zelda opened the door to find a tall cowboy standing in the narrow hallway, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable but determined. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-weathered skin, dark brown hair, and gray eyes that held a surprising amount of kindness. She recognized him vaguely as one of the ranch hands who worked at the Double T Ranch outside of town, though they had never spoken directly. "I do not mean to intrude on your grief, Miss Whitmore," he said quickly, "but I was at the saloon last night, and I heard Thomas Brennan and your sister talking in the alley behind the building. I did not realize at the time what they were planning, but looking back, I should have. And I wanted you to know something that might help, though it might also make things worse." "What could possibly make this worse?" Zelda asked, too exhausted to be polite. "Thomas Brennan is a coward and a cheat," Owen said bluntly. "I played cards with him a few times over the past year, and he cheats at poker. He also owes money all over town, including to some men in Santa Fe who are not patient about collecting debts. I heard him tell your sister last night that they needed to get to California quick because he owed close to $300 he could not pay back." Zelda stared at him. "So, he was running from debt collectors?" "Yes, madam, and I heard your sister say something about how you would never leave Red River because you were too attached to your parents' memory, but she wanted adventure. She wanted to see California and maybe get into theater out there. Thomas promised her he would make her a star." Despite everything, despite the pain and humiliation and betrayal, Zelda felt a laugh bubble up in her throat. It came out sounding slightly hysterical. "So she ran off with a debtor who made impossible promises, and he was only marrying me to look respectable while he figured out his next move." "That would be my guess," Owen said. "And Miss Whitmore, I know this probably does not help much right now, but she did you a favor, trust me. Thomas Brennan is not a good man. He drinks too much, he gambles too much, and I have seen him be cruel to horses when he thinks no one is watching. You would have been miserable married to him." "She did me a favor," Zelda repeated softly. "By stealing my intended husband and making me the laughingstock of Red River? By showing you who he really was before you were legally bound to him," Owen corrected gently. "I know it does not feel like it now, but you are better off, and your sister, if you will pardon me saying so, sounds like she is not much better than he is, running off to become a theater star with a man who owes $300 to dangerous people. They will be lucky if they make it to California at all." Zelda looked at this cowboy, this stranger who had taken the time to come, tell her the truth when he could have simply stayed silent. "Why did you come here, Mr. Calhoun? You do not know me. This is not your concern." He met her eyes steadily. "Because I have a sister back in Texas, and if someone did this to her, I would hope a stranger would have the decency to tell her the truth, and because I do not like seeing a good woman being made a fool of when she deserves better." "You do not know if I am a good woman," Zelda said. "You do not know me at all." "I know you work hard at the general store," Owen said. "I know you never gossip about customers, even though plenty of them deserve it. I know you saved up for 6 months to buy a real glass window for old Mrs. Peterson when hers broke, and she could not afford to replace it. I know you are kind to children and patient with the difficult customers. That tells me plenty about the kind of woman you are." Zelda felt tears prickling at her eyes for the first time since she had walked into that empty chapel. "Thank you, Mr. Calhoun," she whispered, "for telling me the truth and for trying to make me feel better about this disaster." "It is not a disaster," Owen said firmly. "It is a narrow escape. And Miss Whitmore, if you need anything at all, you can find me at the Double T Ranch. I mean that sincerely." He put his hat back on, tipped it to her respectfully, and walked down the stairs. Zelda stood in the doorway of her room for a long moment, processing everything he had said. Thomas was a cheat and a debtor. Caroline wanted to be a theater star. They were running from his creditors. The entire thing was not about love at all. It was about desperation and selfishness, and two people who deserved each other. Owen Calhoun was right. They had done her a favor, but that did not make it hurt any less. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of Zelda's life. She returned to work at the general store the day after her non-wedding, determined to face down the gossip and pity with dignity. Mr. Thornton, who owned the store, was kind enough to give her the most private tasks, letting her work in the storeroom, organizing inventory while his wife handled the counter. But Zelda knew she could not hide forever. Eventually, she had to face the customers and their carefully sympathetic faces and barely concealed curiosity. The first few days were excruciating. Women who had never spoken to her before suddenly wanted to chat, asking pointed questions about whether she had seen any warning signs, whether Caroline had always been jealous of her, whether Thomas had seemed reluctant before the wedding. Men looked at her with a mixture of pity and awkwardness, not knowing what to say. Children stared until their parents shushed them and pulled them away, but Zelda kept her head high and her answers brief. Yes, it had been a shock. No, she had not suspected anything. Yes, she was managing. No, she did not want to discuss it further. Thank you. Gradually, people began to leave her alone, the novelty of the scandal fading as new gossip emerged to capture the town's attention. She saw Owen Calhoun occasionally when he came into town for supplies. He always tipped his hat to her respectfully, asked how she was doing with genuine concern in his gray eyes, but never pushed for more conversation than she seemed willing to give. She appreciated that about him. He did not treat her like broken goods or a figure of pity. He treated her like a person who had survived a difficult situation and was moving forward. 3 weeks after the non-wedding, Zelda was closing up the general store when a well-dressed man in a dusty suit walked in, looking around with sharp eyes. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "I am looking for Thomas Brennan or Caroline Whitmore. I was told they lived in Red River." Zelda's hands tightened on the broom she was holding. "They left town nearly a month ago. I do not know where they went." The man's eyes narrowed. "Are you related to Caroline Whitmore?" "She is my sister. Was my sister. I have not heard from her since she left." "And Thomas Brennan? What was his relationship to you?" Zelda lifted her chin. "He was my intended husband until he ran off with my sister. Now, if you will excuse me, I am closing up for the night." The man studied her for a long moment, and something in his face softened slightly. "I am a debt collector, miss. Thomas Brennan owes a considerable sum to some people in Santa Fe, and I have been hired to find him. If he contacts you, you should know that he is in serious trouble. The people he borrowed from are not forgiving. If he contacts me, which I very much doubt he will, I will tell him that," Zelda said coolly. "Though honestly, sir, whatever trouble he is in is none of my concern. He made his choice when he decided to run off with my sister." The debt collector nodded. "Fair enough, miss. I am sorry for your trouble." He tipped his hat and left, and Zelda watched him go with a strange mixture of satisfaction and concern. She did not care what happened to Thomas Brennan. He deserved whatever consequences came his way. But Caroline, foolish and selfish as she was still her sister, and Zelda could not help worrying about what would happen to her when Thomas's debts caught up with them. She finished closing the store and walked back to the boarding house through the warm evening air. Red River was a small town, tucked into the northern mountains of New Mexico territory, surrounded by high desert and pine forests. The summers were warm but pleasant, the winters harsh with heavy snow. It was beautiful in its own stark way, but Zelda had lived here her entire life, and sometimes felt trapped by its smallness, its predictability. Maybe that was why Caroline had wanted to leave so badly. Maybe she had felt suffocated by Red River's narrow boundaries and limited prospects. But that did not excuse what she had done. There were ways to seek adventure that did not involve betraying your own sister. Zelda was so lost in thought that she did not notice the man stepping out of the alley beside the boarding house until he was directly in front of her. She jumped back with a startled gasp, but the man caught her arm roughly. "You are Caroline Whitmore's sister," he said. It was not a question. He was younger than the debt collector, perhaps 30, with a mean face and the smell of whiskey on his breath. "Where is she?" "I do not know," Zelda said, trying to pull her arm free. "Let go of me." "Your sister and that coward she ran off with owe my boss money," the man said, tightening his grip until Zelda gasped in pain. $300, and if I cannot collect from them, I will collect from you." "I do not have $300, Zelda said desperately. "I work at a general store. I barely make enough to pay for my room. Their debts are not my responsibility." "Family debts are everyone's responsibility," the man said, pulling her further into the alley. "Now, You are going to write a letter to your sister telling her to send that money, or you are going to find out what happens to people who do not pay what they owe." Zelda opened her mouth to scream, but the man clapped his hand over her face. She struggled, kicking and twisting, terror flooding through her veins. This could not be happening. She could not be punished for Thomas's debts and Caroline's choices. It was not fair. It was not right. Let her go. The voice was cold and hard, and the man holding Zelda spun around to find Owen Calhoun standing at the mouth of the alley with a rifle pointed directly at his chest. "Let her go right now, or I will shoot you where you stand." "This is none of your business, cowboy," the man said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. "I am making it my business," Owen said. "That woman owes you nothing. She is not responsible for her sister's debts or Thomas Brennan's poor choices. Now let her go. Get on your horse and ride out of Red River before I decide to take you to the sheriff for assault." The man hesitated, looking between Owen's steady rifle and Zelda's terrified face. Finally, he shoved her away roughly, and she stumbled against the alley wall. "This is not over," he said. "You tell your sister that Miguel Santos does not forget debts." He stalked past Owen and disappeared down the street. Owen lowered his rifle but did not take his eyes off the man until he had mounted a horse and ridden out of town. Then he turned to Zelda, who was leaning against the wall, shaking. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "No," Zelda managed. "Just frightened. Thank you. If you had not been here, I do not know what he would have done." Owen's jaw tightened. "I was making a supply run and saw him grab you. Did he hurt your arm?" Zelda looked down and saw dark bruises already forming where Miguel Santos had gripped her. "It will heal," she said. "Mr. Calhoun, what am I going to do? Another debt collector came by the store earlier today. How many people did Thomas borrow money from? And how many of them will come after me when they cannot find him and Caroline?" Owen was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "Come with me. I want to introduce you to my boss at the Double T Ranch. James Thornhill is a good man, and he knows a lot of people in this territory. If anyone can help keep these debt collectors away from you, it is him." "I cannot just leave town," Zelda protested. "I have work tomorrow." "Tomorrow is Sunday," Owen reminded her gently. "The store is closed. And Miss Whitmore, I am not trying to frighten you, but if Miguel Santos is involved, you are not safe here. He has a reputation for violence, and he does not care about things like innocence or fairness. If he decides you are his leverage to get to Caroline and Thomas, he will use you however he can." Zelda's legs felt weak. "This is a nightmare. I did nothing wrong, and now I am being targeted by violent criminals because of my sister's selfishness." "I know," Owen said quietly, "and it is not fair. But right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe. Will you come with me to the ranch, just for tonight, until we can figure out a plan?" Zelda looked at this cowboy who had twice now come to her aid, when he had no obligation to do so. She barely knew him, but her instincts told her he was trustworthy. And right now, with Miguel Santos's threats still echoing in her ears, she needed someone she could trust. "All right," she said, "let me get some things from my room." 10 minutes later, she was riding behind Owen on his horse, her small bag of belongings clutched in her arms, as they headed out of Red River toward the Double T Ranch. The sun was setting, painting the high desert in shades of orange and purple, and despite her fear and confusion, Zelda felt a strange sense of relief. She was leaving behind the scene of her humiliation, the place where everyone knew her business and pitied her misfortune. Maybe at the ranch, surrounded by people who did not know her story, she could catch her breath and figure out what to do next. The Double T Ranch was larger than she had expected, with a sprawling main house, several bunkhouses for the ranch hands, and extensive corrals and barns for the cattle and horses. Owen helped her down from the horse and led her to the main house, where a man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and a weathered but kind face greeted them at the door. "Owen," he said, "what brings you back so late? And who is this?" "Mr. Thornhill, this is Miss Zelda Whitmore. She is in trouble through no fault of her own, and I was hoping you might be able to help." James Thornhill's eyes sharpened with interest and concern. "Come in, both of you. Tell me what has happened." Over coffee at the large kitchen table, with Owen's help, Zelda explained the entire situation. Her sister running off with her intended husband, the discovery that Thomas was fleeing substantial debts, the debt collectors who had come looking for them, Miguel Santos's threat in the alley. By the time she finished, James Thornhill was frowning deeply. "Miguel Santos. he said heavily. "That is a bad man to have looking for you. He works for a loan operation out of Santa Fe that is rumored to have connections to some dangerous people. If Thomas Brennan borrowed from them, he was a fool." "So what can Miss Whitmore do?" Owen asked. "She cannot go back to town if Santos is going to keep coming after her, and she should not have to pay for debts that are not hers." "Legally, she does not have to pay," James said. "The sister of a debtor is not responsible for the debt unless she co-signed on the loan, which I assume you did not." "Of course not," Zelda said. "I did not even know Thomas was borrowing money." "Then legally, you are in the clear," James said. "But men like Miguel Santos do not care much about legalities. They care about results. If they cannot find Thomas and Caroline, they will use whatever pressure points they can find. And you, Miss Whitmore, are a pressure point." "So what do I do?" Zelda asked, trying to keep the desperation out of her voice. "I cannot leave Red River. I have no money, nowhere to go. My job at the general store is the only income I have." James Thornhill looked at Owen, then back at Zelda. "I have a proposal," he said slowly. "It may sound strange, but hear me out. I need someone to help manage the household here at the ranch. My wife passed away 2 years ago, and while the ranch hands do their best, the house has suffered from lack of a woman's touch. I need someone to cook, clean, manage supplies, handle correspondence, things like that. It is a full-time position, and it comes with room and board, plus a fair wage. You would be safe here, surrounded by ranch hands who would not let anyone harm you. And if Miguel Santos does come looking, he will find a property guarded by 24 armed cowboys who are loyal to me." Zelda stared at him. "You are offering me a job, but you do not even know me." "Owen vouches for you," James said simply. "And Owen is the best judge of character I know. If he says you are trustworthy and hard-working, that is good enough for me. Besides, I remember you from when you were a girl. Your father sold me supplies when I first started this ranch. He was an honest man, and I assume his daughter is cut from the same cloth." Tears pricked at Zelda's eyes. "My father always spoke highly of you, Mr. Thornhill. He said you were one of the few ranchers who paid his bills on time and treated people fairly." "Then we have an existing relationship of sorts," James said gently. "What do you say, Miss Whitmore? Will you come work for me? I promise you will be treated with respect, paid fairly, and kept safe from men like Miguel Santos." Zelda looked at Owen, who was watching her with those steady gray eyes. "You trust Mr. Thornhill?" she asked. "With my life," Owen said without hesitation. "He is the best man I know, Miss Whitmore. You would be safe here, and well treated." Zelda took a deep breath. It was a huge change, leaving town to live on a ranch. But what was there for her in Red River now? A job at a general store where people pitied her. A room at a boarding house where Caroline's betrayal haunted her. The constant risk of debt collectors accosting her in alleys. Here, at least, she would have protection. A fresh start. A chance to rebuild her life away from the gossip and the memories. "All right," she said. "I accept your offer, Mr. Thornhill. Thank you for your kindness." "Excellent," James said, smiling for the first time. "Owen, show Miss Whitmore to the spare bedroom in the east wing. It is not fancy, but it is clean and comfortable. Miss Whitmore, you can start whenever you feel ready. Take a few days to settle in, get to know the ranch, and then we will discuss your specific duties." That night, Zelda lay in a comfortable bed in a room that smelled of pine and clean linen, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. Horses whinnied in the corrals. Somewhere, a cowboy was playing a harmonica softly. The wind whistled through the eaves. It was all so different from the boarding house in town, where she could hear every creak and conversation through the thin walls. She thought about Caroline and Thomas, somewhere out there in the vast West, running from debts and consequences. She thought about the wedding that never happened, the life she had planned that had evaporated like morning dew. She thought about Miguel Santos and his threats, and the strange twist of fate that had brought Owen Calhoun into her life at exactly the right moments. She did not know what the future held, but for the first time since that terrible morning in the chapel, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe this disaster was not the end of her life. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. The next morning, Zelda woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from the kitchen. She dressed quickly in her simple calico dress, pinned up her hair, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was large and well-equipped, and she found James Thornhill attempting to cook breakfast with mixed results. The bacon was burning, the coffee was weak, and there was a pan of eggs that looked more scrambled than they probably should have been. "Good morning, Miss Whitmore," James said cheerfully. "I am demonstrating exactly why I need your help. I can run a cattle ranch with 200 head, but I cannot seem to make a decent breakfast to save my life." Zelda could not help but smile. "Let me," she said, moving to the stove. Within minutes she had salvaged the bacon, dumped the weak coffee and started a fresh pot, and produced a batch of fluffy biscuits from the well-stocked pantry. When Owen and several other ranch hands came in for breakfast, they found a table laden with food that actually looked edible. "Well, I will be," Owen said, grinning. "Miss Whitmore, I think you just became the most popular person on this ranch. We have been eating James's cooking for 2 years, and let me tell you, it has been rough." The other ranch hands laughed and agreed enthusiastically. Zelda found herself relaxing in their easy camaraderie. They were polite but not overly formal, treating her with respect, but also including her in their jokes and conversations. It was different from the careful distance people had kept in town after the scandal. Over the next few weeks, Zelda settled into her new life at the Double T Ranch. Her duties were varied and kept her busy from dawn until evening, but she found she enjoyed the work. She cooked 3 meals a day for James and whatever ranch hands were around, which required planning and organization. She cleaned and maintained the main house, which was large but had been neglected. She managed supplies and kept the household accounts, discovering she had a knack for organization and numbers. She even helped with some of the ranch correspondence, writing letters to buyers and suppliers in her neat, educated hand. But more than the work, she enjoyed the peace. The ranch was beautiful, surrounded by rolling hills and distant mountains. The air was clean and clear, scented with pine and sage. The work was hard but satisfying, and at the end of each day she fell into bed, exhausted but content. She was no longer the abandoned bride, the object of pity and gossip. She was simply Zelda, the housekeeper at the Double T, and people respected her for her competence and hard work. Owen was a constant presence during those weeks. He was the ranch foreman, which meant he oversaw the daily operations and supervised the other ranch hands. He was good at his job, firm but fair with the men, and clearly respected by everyone on the property. He was also kind to Zelda in small, thoughtful ways. He fixed the squeaky hinge on her bedroom door without being asked. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows when he was out checking the cattle. He always asked how she was doing, really doing, and listened to her answers with genuine interest. Zelda found herself looking forward to seeing him each day. There was something solid and reassuring about Owen Calhoun. He did not make flowery speeches or grand promises. He simply showed up, did his work well, and treated people with respect. After Thomas's lies and manipulation, Owen's straightforward honesty was deeply appealing, but she was cautious about her growing feelings. She had been so wrong about Thomas, had missed all the warning signs that he was not what he seemed. How could she trust her judgment now? And besides, Owen had never indicated that his kindness was anything more than friendly concern. He was helping her because it was the right thing to do, not because he had romantic intentions. One evening in late July, about 6 weeks after Zelda had moved to the ranch, she was in the kitchen preparing supper when James Thornhill came in with a serious expression. "Miss Whitmore, I wanted to let you know that Miguel Santos was in Red River today asking about you. He went to the general store and the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson told him you had left town, and she did not know where you went, which was good of her." Zelda's hands stilled on the vegetables she was chopping. "Do you think he will come here?" "He might," James said honestly. "But if he does, he will find a very different situation than a lone woman in a town alley. I have already spoken to the ranch hands. Everyone knows to be on alert, and no one is to give any information about you to strangers. You are under my protection, Miss Whitmore, and everyone who works here understands that." "Thank you," Zelda said quietly. "I am sorry to bring this trouble to your home." "You did not bring it," James said firmly. "Thomas Brennan and your sister brought it. You are simply dealing with the consequences of their selfishness, and that is not right or fair. But we will keep you safe. I promise you that." That night, Zelda could not sleep. She kept thinking about Miguel Santos, imagining him riding up to the ranch with men and guns, demanding that she pay Thomas's debts. She knew James and the ranch hands would protect her, but she hated being a source of potential danger to people who had been nothing but kind to her. Around midnight, unable to bear her churning thoughts any longer, she got up and went downstairs to the kitchen. She lit a lamp and started making bread, kneading the dough with firm, angry motions. Baking always helped her think, helped her calm down. She was so focused on her work that she did not hear footsteps on the stairs until Owen spoke from the doorway. "Could not sleep?" Zelda jumped, then laughed shakily. "You startled me. No, I could not sleep. Too much on my mind." Owen came into the kitchen, still dressed in his work clothes like he had not gone to bed yet. "Miguel Santos?" "Among other things," Zelda admitted. She punched down the dough with perhaps more force than necessary. "I just keep thinking about how unfair this all is. I did everything right. I worked hard. I was faithful. I planned a respectable life with a man I thought was decent. And my reward for all that goodness was betrayal and humiliation and now being hunted by debt collectors for money I do not owe. Where is the justice in that?" "There is not any," Owen said quietly. He pulled out a chair and sat at the kitchen table, watching her work. "Life is not fair, Miss Whitmore. Bad things happen to good people all the time. Good things happen to bad people. There is no cosmic ledger keeping track and making sure everyone gets what they deserve." "That is a depressing philosophy," Zelda said, but there was no heat in her words. "Maybe," Owen agreed, "but it is also freeing in a way. If you stop expecting life to be fair, you stop being disappointed when it is not. You just focus on doing the right thing because it is the right thing, not because you expect to be rewarded for it." Zelda shaped the dough into loaves and set them aside to rise, then washed her hands and sat down across from Owen. "Is that why you helped me? Because it was the right thing to do?" "Partly," Owen said. He met her eyes steadily in the lamplight. "But also because I wanted to. Because I saw a woman who was being treated badly through no fault of her own, and I thought she deserved better. And because I liked you, Miss Whitmore. I had seen you around town for the past year, and I always thought you were different from most people, kinder, more genuine." Zelda felt her heart skip a beat. "You noticed me before the wedding disaster?" "I did," Owen admitted. "I even thought about asking if I could call on you properly. But then I heard you were engaged to Thomas Brennan, so I kept my distance. And honestly, I was glad when he turned out to be a coward and a cheat, because it meant you did not have to waste your life on someone so far beneath you." "Owen," Zelda whispered. It was the first time she had used his first name, and it felt intimate, meaningful. "I am not saying this to pressure you," Owen said quickly. "I know you have been through a lot, and the last thing you need is another man making demands or declarations. I just wanted you to know that my help was not just out of duty or kindness, it was personal. You are important to me, Zelda. Your happiness matters to me." Zelda felt tears prickling at her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of unexpected joy. "You are important to me, too," she said softly. "These past weeks, working here, seeing you every day, it has been the best part of a very difficult time. You make me feel safe. You make me feel valued." "You are valued," Owen said. "By James, by all the ranch hands, and especially by me." He reached across the table and took her hand gently. "I know you probably need time. I know you have been hurt, and you are cautious about trusting again. But I want you to know that I am here, and I am not going anywhere. Whenever you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like the chance to court you properly, to show you what it is like to be with a man who keeps his promises and tells the truth." Zelda looked down at their joined hands. Owen's palm was rough with calluses from hard work, warm and strong and steady, just like him. "I think I would like that," she said. "I am not ready for anything too serious yet, but I would like to spend more time with you, to get to know you better, to see where this might go." "That is all I am asking," Owen said, and his smile was like sunrise, warm and bright. "We will take it slow, no pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other and seeing if there is something real here." "Something real," Zelda repeated. "Yes, I would like something real." They sat there in the lamplight, hands clasped across the kitchen table, and Zelda felt something shift inside her. The constant ache of betrayal and humiliation began to ease, replaced by a tentative hope. Maybe Caroline and Thomas had done her a favor after all. Maybe their betrayal had freed her to find something better, something true. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Zelda had experienced with Thomas. With Thomas, everything had been formal and proper, a series of carefully orchestrated encounters designed to lead to an inevitable engagement. With Owen, everything was natural and easy. They talked while she cooked, and he did paperwork at the kitchen table, They took long walks around the ranch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. They sat on the porch after supper, watching the stars come out and sharing stories about their childhoods, their hopes, their dreams. Owen told her about growing up in Texas, the youngest of 4 siblings. His sister, the one he had mentioned, had married a good man and had 3 children. His brothers were scattered across the West, working various jobs. He had come to New Mexico 5 years ago, looking for work, and had found a place at the Double T Ranch that felt like home. Zelda told him about her parents, about growing up in Red River, about the pain of losing them to fever and then losing the farm. She even told him about Caroline, about how close they had been as children and how something had shifted as they got older. Caroline had always been the prettier one, the more charming one, and she had resented when Zelda got engaged first. Now, Zelda wondered if that resentment had been building for years, waiting for a chance to explode. "Do you miss her?" Owen asked one evening as they sat by the creek that ran through the ranch property. Zelda thought about it carefully. "I miss who she used to be, or maybe who I thought she was, but I do not miss the real Caroline, the one who could betray me so completely. I do not think I want her back in my life, even if she came back and apologized." "That is fair," Owen said. "Family is important, but not at the cost of your own peace and dignity." "Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved?" Zelda asked. Owen was quiet for a moment. "Once," he said finally. "When I was 20, I was engaged to a girl back in Texas. Sarah was her name. We had been sweethearts since we were 16, and everyone expected we would marry. But then I got hurt in a cattle drive accident, broke my leg badly. I was laid up for months, could not work, had no money coming in, and Sarah decided she did not want to wait around for a broke cowboy who might never walk right again. She married a banker's son 3 months later." "Oh, Owen," Zelda said softly. "That must have been devastating." "It was at the time," Owen admitted. "But looking back, it taught me something important. It taught me the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you can do for them. Sarah did not love me. She loved the idea of being married to a successful cowboy. When that did not work out, she moved on to the next opportunity. A real partner sticks with you through the hard times, not just the good ones." "Is that why you never married?" Zelda asked. "Partly. Also because I never met anyone else I wanted to marry until now." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "I am not going to rush you, Zelda, but I want you to know that what I feel for you is real. It is not about what you can do for me or how you make me look. It is about who you are as a person, and I would stick with you through hard times. I promise you that." Zelda felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I believe you," she whispered. "And Owen, what I feel for you is real too. I did not think I could feel this way again after Thomas, but you have shown me that what I felt for him was not real love. It was just an idea of love, a plan I made because it seemed like the right thing to do. What we have, this is different. This is real." Owen reached out and gently cupped her face in his hand. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Zelda breathed, and when his lips met hers, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle but passionate, full of promise and possibility. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I am falling in love with you, Zelda Whitmore," Owen said softly. "I am falling in love with you too, Owen Calhoun," Zelda replied. But their peaceful happiness was not to last. 2 weeks after that first kiss, Miguel Santos came to the Double T Ranch with 5 armed men. Zelda was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion outside, raised voices and the sound of horses. She moved to the window and felt her blood run cold when she saw Santos sitting on his horse, facing James Thornhill and a dozen ranch hands who had formed a protective line in front of the house. "I am here for Zelda Whitmore," Santos was saying, his voice carrying through the open window. "I know she is here. The boarding house keeper in Red River finally told me after I made it worth her while. Now, bring her out, or my men, and I will come in and get her." "Miss Whitmore is under my protection," James said coldly, "and she owes you nothing. Her sister's debts are not her responsibility." "I decide what is someone's responsibility," Santos said. "And right now, I need leverage to get Thomas Brennan to pay what he owes. His sister-in-law seems like good leverage to me." Zelda's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to walk outside onto the porch. Owen tried to grab her arm, to pull her back inside, but she shook her head. "No, I will not hide while good people get hurt defending me." She stepped off the porch and faced Miguel Santos directly. "I am Zelda Whitmore," she said, proud that her voice did not shake. "And I will tell you the same thing I told you in Red River. I do not have Thomas Brennan's money. I did not even know he had borrowed it. He was supposed to marry me, but instead he ran off with my sister, leaving me to deal with the consequences of his actions. I am a victim in this, just as much as you are, Mr. Santos. Probably more so." Santos looked her up and down, assessingly. "You seem like a smart woman, Miss Whitmore. Smart enough to know that I cannot just walk away empty-handed. I have a reputation to maintain. So, here is what is going to happen. You are going to come with me. I am going to use you to draw out Thomas Brennan, and when he pays what he owes, plus interest for my trouble, you will be free to go." "And if he does not pay?" Zelda asked. Santos smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Then I sell you to someone who will find you useful. There are always buyers for a pretty white woman with no family to protect her." The ranch hands erupted in angry shouts, and Owen started forward with murder in his eyes. But James held up a hand, his face cold as stone. "That is not going to happen, Santos. You are not taking Miss Whitmore anywhere. You and your men are going to turn around and ride off my property, or I am going to have my men shoot you where you sit." Santos laughed. "You are outnumbered, old man. I have 6 men. You have what, maybe a dozen ranch hands? And how many of them are actually willing to die for a woman they barely know?" "All of us." The voice came from behind Santos, and everyone turned to see Sheriff Bradley from Red River riding up with 6 deputies all armed. "Because threatening innocent women is something we take seriously in this territory, Santos. Now, you and your men put your hands where I can see them, or my deputies will be happy to shoot you for resisting arrest." Santos's face twisted with fury, but he was smart enough to recognize a losing situation. He and his men slowly raised their hands, and the deputies moved in to disarm and arrest them. Sheriff Bradley rode up to the porch and tipped his hat to Zelda. "Miss Whitmore, I got a telegram from the marshal in Santa Fe this morning. Seems Thomas Brennan and Caroline Whitmore were arrested 2 days ago trying to cross into California. Thomas had several outstanding warrants, and your sister was charged as an accomplice. They are both in jail awaiting trial. The marshal asked me to let you know that you are not considered responsible for any of Brennan's debts, and to keep an eye out for any debt collectors who might try to harass you. Looks like I got here just in time." Zelda felt her knees go weak with relief, and Owen was there immediately, supporting her with a strong arm around her waist. "They were arrested?" she asked. "Both of them?" "Yes, madam, and according to the marshal, your sister has been very cooperative, giving testimony about Brennan's various schemes and frauds in exchange for a lighter sentence. Seems love did not last very long once they ran out of money and the law caught up with them." Zelda did not know how to feel about that. Relief that Thomas would face justice. Sadness that Caroline had thrown away her life for a man who was not worth it. Vindication that she had been right to let them go rather than chase after them. It was a complicated tangle of emotions. "What will happen to them?" she asked. "Thomas Brennan is looking at several years in prison," the sheriff said. "Your sister will probably get a shorter sentence since she is cooperating. But, Miss Whitmore, I want to be clear about something. You are not responsible for your sister's choices or Thomas's crimes. You have done nothing wrong, and no one has any legal right to harass you or demand money from you. Miguel Santos here will be spending quite a bit of time in jail himself for attempted kidnapping and assault." Santos spat on the ground but said nothing as the deputies hauled him and his men away. The sheriff followed, promising to send word if Zelda was needed for any testimony at the trials. When they were gone, the ranch hands dispersed back to their work, leaving Zelda standing on the porch with Owen and James. She felt strange, hollow, and relieved and sad all at once. "It is over," she said wonderingly. "It is actually over." "It is," James agreed. "You are safe now, Miss Whitmore. You can stop looking over your shoulder." Zelda nodded, but tears were streaming down her face now, all the fear and stress of the past months finally releasing. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly while she cried against his chest. "I have you," he murmured. "You are safe. I have you." When the tears finally subsided, Zelda pulled back and wiped her face with her apron. "I am sorry. I do not usually fall apart like that." "You have earned the right to fall apart," Owen said gently. "You have been through hell, Zelda. Anyone would break down." "What happens now?" Zelda asked. "Caroline is in jail. Thomas is in jail. Miguel Santos is in jail. I suppose I should feel vindicated, but I just feel tired." "Then rest," James said kindly. "Take a few days off. Owen, why do not you take Miss Whitmore up to the high meadow? The summer flowers are in full bloom up there, and it is peaceful. Do her good to get away from the ranch for a bit, clear her head." Owen looked at Zelda. "Would you like that?" Zelda thought about it. A few days away from everything, just her and Owen in the mountains. It sounded like heaven. "Yes," she said. "I would like that very much." The next morning, they packed supplies and rode out toward the high meadow that James had mentioned. It was a 3-hour ride up into the mountains, following old game trails through pine forests and across rushing creeks. The air got cooler and cleaner as they climbed, and Zelda felt the tension gradually leaving her shoulders. The high meadow was worth the journey. It was a wide, flat expanse of grassland, surrounded by peaks, carpeted with wildflowers in every color imaginable: purple lupines, yellow sunflowers, red Indian paintbrush, white daisies, all swaying in the breeze. There was a small cabin at the edge of the meadow, a line shack that the ranch used during summer grazing season, currently empty. They spent 3 days in that meadow, and they were some of the most peaceful days of Zelda's life. During the day, they explored the high country, riding to hidden lakes and rocky overlooks with views that stretched for miles. They picked wildflowers and watched eagles soar overhead. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. In the evenings, they cooked simple meals over the fire and sat outside, watching the stars emerge in a sky so clear and dark that the Milky Way looked like a river of light. They held hands and kissed and talked about the future in careful, hopeful terms. On the last night, lying in Owen's arms under a blanket near the fire, Zelda finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "What do you want from life, Owen? Really want, deep down?" Owen was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair gently. "I want a place of my own someday," he said finally. "Not a big ranch like the Double T, but a small spread where I can raise horses and cattle. I want a home that is really mine, where I can put down roots. And I want a family, a wife who loves me and children to pass my name to. I want to build something that lasts." "That sounds wonderful," Zelda said softly. "What about you?" Owen asked. "What do you want?" Zelda thought carefully. "I thought I wanted stability and respectability," she said. "A nice house in town, a husband with a good reputation, a quiet, predictable life. But I think what I really want is what you described, a home that is really mine, a partner I can trust completely, a life built on honest work and real love. I do not need fancy things or social status. I just want to be happy." "You make me happy," Owen said, tilting her face up to look at him. "These past months, getting to know you, falling in love with you, it has been the best time of my life. I know we have not been courting very long, and I do not want to rush you, but Zelda, I need you to know that I am serious about you. I am in this for the long haul. I want to marry you someday when you are ready. I want to build that life with you." Zelda's heart swelled with emotion. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want to marry you, Owen. Maybe not right away. I need a little more time to heal from everything that happened, but soon. I know what I feel for you is real. I know you are the right person for me. So yes, let us build that life together." Owen kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Zelda felt something settle in her soul. This was right. This was real. This was the life she was meant to have. They returned to the ranch 3 days later to find good news waiting. James Thornhill had received an offer from a neighboring rancher who wanted to retire and sell his small spread. It was about 200 acres with a decent house, good water, and room to expand. The price was fair, and James was willing to loan Owen the money to buy it, to be paid back over time from the ranch's profits. "I know you have been wanting your own place," James said to Owen, "and I figure you will probably be wanting to get married soon, based on the way you two have been looking at each other. This seemed like good timing." Owen looked at Zelda, his eyes full of hope and question. "What do you think? It is not much, but it could be ours. We could build it into something good." "I think it sounds perfect," Zelda said, smiling. "Let us go look at it." The property was everything James had described and more. The house was small but solid, with 2 bedrooms, a big kitchen, and a porch that faced the mountains. There were corrals and a barn, a good well, and acres of grassland perfect for horses. It needed work, but Zelda could see the potential immediately. "We could build it into a horse ranch," Owen said, walking the property with her. Breed quality horses, train them, sell them to ranches across the territory. There is good money in horses if you know what you're doing, and I do. And you could keep working as a housekeeper for James if you wanted, or we could hire help on the ranch, whatever makes you happy. I think I would like to focus on our ranch, Zelda said, building something that is ours. But Owen, are you sure about this? It is a big financial commitment, and we are not even married yet. I have never been more sure of anything in my life, Owen said, except maybe how much I love you. Zelda Whitmore, will you marry me? Will you build this life with me? Zelda felt tears of joy streaming down her face. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Owen Calhoun. I love you so much. They were married in October, just as the leaves were turning gold in the mountains. It was a small ceremony in Red River, with James Thornhill standing as Owen's best man, and Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house standing up with Zelda. The town turned out for the wedding, and this time, when Zelda walked down the aisle of the chapel, the man waiting for her was exactly who he was supposed to be. Sheriff Bradley gave her away since she had no family left, and Reverend Patterson conducted the ceremony with a gentle smile. When Owen slipped the simple gold band onto her finger and promised to love and cherish her all the days of his life, Zelda knew he meant every word. The reception was held at the Double T Ranch with food and dancing and genuine celebration. The ranch hands were delighted that their foreman had found happiness, and they toasted the couple with enthusiasm. Even Mr. Thornton from the general store came, bringing a beautiful quilt as a wedding gift and saying how glad he was that Zelda had found such a good man. As the sun set and the dancing continued, Owen led Zelda away from the crowd to a quiet spot overlooking the ranch. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. "Happier than I have ever been," Zelda said honestly. "A year ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never recover from the humiliation and betrayal. But Owen, you showed me that Caroline and Thomas did do me a favor. They freed me to find something real. They freed me to find you. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me," Owen promised. "I could never regret you," Zelda said, turning in his arms to kiss him. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." They moved into their own ranch the next week, and the first few months of marriage were busy and joyful. They worked from sunup to sundown, repairing fences, improving the house, starting their horse breeding program. Owen proved to be an excellent horseman, with a gift for training even the most difficult animals. Zelda managed the household and the ranch accounts, and also started a small vegetable garden that flourished under her care. In the evenings, they would sit on their porch, exhausted but content, watching the sun set over their land. They would talk about their plans for the ranch, their hopes for the future. Sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, holding hands, grateful for what they had found together. In December, Zelda realized she was pregnant. She told Owen on Christmas morning, and his joy was so pure and complete that she cried happy tears in his arms. "We are going to be parents," he kept saying, wonderstruck. "We are going to have a family." Their son was born in late August of 1879, a healthy, squalling baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. They named him William James Calhoun, after Owen's father and James Thornhill, who had helped them so much. Will was the light of their lives, and watching Owen with his son made Zelda fall even more deeply in love with her husband. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, years when the horse sales were poor and money was tight. There were illnesses and accidents, the normal trials of life on a ranch in the New Mexico territory. But through it all, Owen and Zelda faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. They never heard from Caroline. According to the occasional letter from Sheriff Bradley, she had served a year in jail and then disappeared into California, presumably trying to start over. Thomas Brennan served 5 years in prison and was never heard from again after his release. Zelda found she did not care what happened to either of them. They were part of a past life that seemed distant and unreal now. In 1881, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Marie, and in 1884, another son named Henry. Their ranch prospered, growing from a small operation to a respected horse breeding facility known throughout the territory. Owen's reputation as a horseman spread, and buyers came from as far as Texas and Colorado to purchase Calhoun horses. James Thornhill remained a close friend and mentor, often riding over to visit and play with his honorary grandchildren. He told anyone who would listen that giving Owen the loan to buy the ranch was the best business decision he had ever made, not just because Owen paid back every penny ahead of schedule, but because seeing the young couple build such a good life together restored his faith in the world. On their 10th anniversary in October 1888, Owen took Zelda back to the high meadow where they had first talked about building a life together. The wildflowers were gone, replaced by autumn grasses, but it was still beautiful, still peaceful. "Do you remember the last time we were here?" Owen asked, holding her close. "I remember everything about that trip," Zelda said. "It was when I finally let myself believe that we could have a future together, that I could be happy again." "Are you happy?" Owen asked. "Really happy?" Zelda looked at her husband, at the face she had loved for 10 years, at the man who had kept every promise he had ever made to her. "I am more than happy," she said. "I am fulfilled, I am content. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, with exactly who I am supposed to be with. Caroline and Thomas running away was the best thing that ever happened to me, because it brought me to you." "She did you a favor," Owen said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago in that boarding house hallway. "You were right," Zelda agreed. "She did, and I will be grateful for it every day for the rest of my life." They stood there in the high meadow as the sun set, two people who had found real love in unexpected circumstances, who had built something lasting and true from the ashes of betrayal and disappointment. Their children were healthy and happy. Their ranch was thriving. Their love was strong. And Zelda knew, with absolute certainty, that this was the life she was always meant to have. Not the respectable, predictable life she had planned with Thomas Brennan, but this wild, joyful, challenging, beautiful life with Owen Calhoun, the cowboy who had seen her at her lowest point and told her the hard truth that set her free. They returned to the ranch as the stars emerged, riding side by side through the gathering darkness, heading home to the life they had built together. And if sometimes Zelda thought about that terrible morning in the empty chapel, it was only to marvel at how far she had come, how much she had gained by losing what she thought she wanted. Years later, when their children asked about how their parents met, Zelda would tell them the whole story, about the wedding that never happened, about the sister who ran away with the intended husband, about the cowboy who appeared at exactly the right moments to help a woman who had lost everything. She told them about the high meadow and the horse ranch, and the love that grew slowly and steadily into something unshakable. And she always ended the story the same way. "Your Aunt Caroline did me the biggest favor of my life, even though she did not mean to. She showed me who your father really was, which allowed me to find your father, who is exactly who he has always appeared to be. And that, my darlings, is worth more than any easy path or respectable marriage could ever be." William and Sarah and Henry grew up hearing that story, understanding that sometimes the worst things that happen to us clear the way for the best things to come. They saw the evidence of it every day in their parents' happy marriage, in the successful ranch, in the community of friends and neighbors who respected the Calhoun family. Will grew up to be a fine horseman like his father, eventually taking over the ranch and expanding it even further. Sarah married a doctor and moved to Santa Fe, but returned often to visit. Henry became a teacher, educating children across the territory. All three of them carried forward the values their parents had taught them: honesty, hard work, loyalty, and the understanding that real love is built on trust and respect, not pretty words and false promises. Owen and Zelda lived long, happy lives together. They saw their children married and their grandchildren born. They celebrated the turn of the century in 1900, marveling at how much the world had changed since that summer of 1878 when their paths first crossed in the worst of circumstances. When Owen passed away peacefully in 1915 at the age of 62, surrounded by his family, his last words were to Zelda, "Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." Zelda held his hand as he slipped away, grateful for every moment they had shared, every challenge they had overcome together, every joy they had experienced. She had been given 37 years with a man who truly loved her, who had built a beautiful life with her, who had never once made her doubt his devotion. She lived another 5 years, long enough to see women get the right to vote in 1920, which pleased her enormously. She spent those final years surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and engaged with the world, still grateful for the unexpected path her life had taken. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1920, her children found a letter she had written to be read after her death. In it, She reflected on her long life, on the ups and downs, the joys and sorrows. But mostly she wrote about Owen and about how a terrible betrayal had led her to the greatest love of her life. "I do not know where Caroline ended up," she wrote. "I do not know if she ever found happiness or if she regretted her choices. But I hope, wherever she is, she knows that I forgave her long ago. Not because what she did was right, but because it led me to Owen, and for that gift, however unintentionally given, I will always be grateful. She did me a favor, just as Owen said. And what a tremendous favor it turned out to be." The letter was passed down through the Calhoun family for generations, a reminder that sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as our worst disasters. That betrayal can lead to better things, that the path we think we want is not always the path we need. And somewhere in the high country of New Mexico, the wildflowers still bloom every summer in the meadow where two people once sat and dreamed of a future together. The cabin is long gone. The ranch has changed hands multiple times, but the land remembers. It remembers a cowboy and a woman who found real love in the wreckage of false promises, who built something lasting from heartbreak and hope. Their story became part of the landscape, part of the history of Red River and the surrounding ranches. Old-timers would tell it to newcomers, always with a knowing smile. It became a legend of sorts, the tale of the abandoned bride who found true love with the cowboy who told her the hard truth she needed to hear. And the moral of the story, passed down through generations, was always the same. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise. Sometimes betrayal clears the way for blessing. And sometimes a cowboy is exactly right when he says, "She did you a favor, trust me." Because in the end, Caroline had done Zelda a favor. She had freed her from a life of lies and mediocrity. She had accidentally pushed Zelda toward a man who would love her truly and completely for the rest of their lives. She had, in her own selfish way, given her sister the greatest gift possible, the chance at real happiness. And Zelda Whitmore Calhoun, who lived to be 65 years old and saw the dawn of a new century, who raised 3 wonderful children and built a successful ranch and loved a good man with all her heart, would tell anyone who asked that she would not change a single thing about her story. Not the humiliation, not the betrayal, not even the fear and uncertainty that followed. Because all of it, every painful moment, had led her to Owen, and Owen had been worth it all. The end.